Hey folks, welcome to another West Yorkshire Retro Gamer video. Today I just wanted to have a little talk about the kind of signings that Leeds United might be able to bring in this summer now that we've confirmed promotion to the Premier League. So I did a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, a bit of looking into things, and combining some of the rumours that have been floating around and looking into certain players who are out of contract, and then just other players that have had a good season in their current respective teams. I've put together a list of players who I would be, pretty reasonably okay with coming into Leeds United this summer. I'm going to go through each one and just talk a little bit about them and kind of explain how I think they would fit into the Leeds squad. Now, I have titled it as a possible new 11 for Leeds. Obviously, this 11 would not all play at the same time, but they would enhance the squad. So, let's start off with the goalkeeper position. Now, anyone that's watched any of my previous Leeds United videos will know that I highly rate Lionel Messi. A lot of people forget that he is still relatively young for a goalkeeper. Certainly not a kid anymore. But he's played a lot of games now, and in the end it was the right decision to bring Carl Darlow in for the last few games. Carl has tightened things up at the back and helped us get over the line. But I do still think there is a future for Lionel Messi at Leeds United. However, in the Premier League, he is going to need some serious competition for that number one spot. And it has been rumoured that there could be interest in Newcastle United's goalkeeper, former England international Nick Pope. Now, when you're talking about experience, this guy's got it in absolute bucket loads. He's played a lot of games in the Premier League. He's been capped by England, and if it hadn't been for Pickford, would probably have had more caps for England than he's got. He's an absolute unit, about 6'5" tall, and vastly experienced in the Premier League. And if there's one thing that I think is going to help Leeds United, is bringing in some serious Premier League experience, and Nick Pope has plenty of it. There is a slight concern over an injury record that Pope has had. However, I don't think it's that detrimental, and I don't think that on his current contractual situation that he would cost Leeds an absolute shed load. So I think Pope would be a pretty decent acquisition, and I think that Lionel could learn a lot from him. Pope wouldn't be a long-term solution, but certainly in terms of just keeping Leeds in the division, offer him a 2-year contract, maybe 3 if he feels he can go that long. I don't think he'd cost Leeds any more than maybe about 10 million. At the current age that he's at, so I think it'd be a pretty decent addition. Moving on to right back. Now this kid was very highly rated as a teenager, and then he had some horrific injuries. Now, if this player can regain any kind of fitness that he has had in the past, then this could be an absolute steal. Tariq Lamptey. currently at Brighton and Hove Albion. This is a right back at a good age, has already got over 100 appearances in the Premier League, despite the injury problems that he's had. And under his current contractual situation, he'd be easy to get. If Leeds could offer the right wages and offer him the right kind of project, if he can prove his fitness. Still only about 24 years old, and if he's already got over 100 appearances in the Premier League at a decent level in the Premier League. Let's not beat around the bush. Brighton have been a solid team for a couple of seasons now. So that'd be a cracking pickup, and again, would be affordable because of his contractual situation. And very similarly, moving on to left back, Tyrick Mitchell, currently at Crystal Palace. He's got maybe pushing even closer to 200 appearances in the Premier League for Palace. Both him and Lamptey, very highly rated fullbacks, and again they're both in their early to mid 20s. So the age bracket there is very good for the amount of experience that they've got at the top level. And again, his contractual situation is similar to Lamptey's. He hasn't got long left, so I think the fullback pairing of Lamptey and Mitchell, if they could both stay fit, very, very useful. And I think that they would adapt to Farke's style in terms of what he wants from his fullbacks. Having that license to get forward as well as defend. Moving on to centre backs. Now, this next one has been heavily linked with Leeds United, but it was always going to be dependable on what division Leeds were going to be playing in next season, and that is Swiss international Nico Elvedi, currently at Borussia Mönchengladbach. Now, this is a club that Daniel Farke knows quite well. He's managed them before, and Elvedi was one of his most important players. So, a Swiss international, quite a lot of experience in his late 20s, so he's still got plenty of time. Definitely playing at his, you'd expect him to be in his peak years now, but a rock solid defender who could potentially, be a very reliable centre back at Premier League level. And partnering him would be someone that is highly experienced in the Premier League, and that is Ben Davies, Welsh international. He's got nearly 300 career appearances, with over 270, I think, in the Premier League with Tottenham. Not the biggest of defenders, but again, he's got over 90 caps for Wales as well. I think he's very, very experienced at this level. Knows the division inside out, has played at a good level. I know Tottenham have had a dodgy season this season, but he's the kind of defender that could, just bring an absolute wealth of experience, and the idea of Davies and Elvedi at centre back, I think, could be quite solid. Moving on to midfield. If we assume that Farke would stick with the 4-2-3-1 formation that he's used in the Championship, the first player is another player from his old club Borussia Mönchengladbach, and that is Julian Weigl, German international. Again, very highly experienced, late 20s, and was, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he was the most used player under Farke when he managed Gladbach. So this is another player that Daniel obviously trusts, and a player that Daniel would be quite happy to rely on at the highest level. Um, moving on to the other defensive midfield position, and it's an old Leeds lad, Calvin Phillips. Now, Calvin, at his peak, when he played his final season at Leeds United, was absolutely fantastic at Leeds, and his form earned him a place in the England squad. He was one of Southgate's first names in the squad list, um, and he was just an absolute rock, playing in a single defensive midfield position for Leeds United. It earned him his big money move to Manchester City, and it's safe to say that that has not worked out whatsoever for Calvin. He has struggled for fitness, struggled for form. He was never going to get ahead of Rodrigo, the other midfielder at Man City at the time. He's had a couple of loan spells that haven't really worked out for him. And I think the one club that could get the best out of Calvin Phillips is the club that he enjoyed his best football, and that is at Leeds. And it could be his last chance, to really reinvigorate his career. So, at the end of the day, there's no way in hell that Leeds would be able to afford getting Calvin on a permanent deal, but I am fairly certain that Manchester City would welcome a loan move, with a signing on fee, of which Leeds could afford, and would probably have to limit it to maybe 50% of Calvin's current wages. If some kind of agreement like that could be put together, then the only other question is, can Calvin Phillips play in a double pivot as opposed to being the sole anchorman in the midfield? Only time would tell with that. Moving on to the wings, starting out with the right winger. Now this might be seen as a little bit of an average option here, and that's Jacob Murphy. His twin brother currently plays for Portsmouth. He used to play for Oxford before that. Jacob Murphy now is about 30-year-old, but he is absolutely highly experienced at this level. And he's had a very productive season for Newcastle as well, chipping in with goals and assists from the right wing. So again, I think that with the trajectory that Newcastle are going in at the moment, I don't think that they would see Murphy as a first choice winger going into next season. I think they will probably look to get in some world class quality. Leeds don't necessarily need world class quality going into this new season. They just need some know-how, some experience, players that know this division inside out. And to be fair to Murphy, he does. It's not a glamorous signing if we were to get Jacob Murphy, but you can't argue with the amount of experience that he possesses. And then going on to the left wing, and this might be a player that maybe Altanaka knows quite well, and that is Daizen Maeda, currently playing for Glasgow Celtic. He's had another very productive season for the Hoops. He's got over 20 goal involvements on the left wing, and could be the type of player that could maybe thrive in the type of style of football that Farke will want to try and play, and it would be a good test for Maeda to see if he could hack it at Premier League level. The Scottish Premier League is not the same level whatsoever, but it would be an interesting punt. And I do like the way that Japanese and South Korean players play football. I think it's very flary, very stylish, and very effective. So that would be an interesting one. Now this next one is completely out of nowhere, really. This was just me looking through players that have had good seasons at teams that aren't necessarily, the biggest hitters in their divisions. And to be fair to FC20, after the big three in Holland, they're the next best this season. And they currently have a 23-year-old attacking midfielder called Sam Stein. And he's having a very, very good season. Chipping in with goals and assists, quite a lot of them. And at just 23 years old, this player could have some real potential. It's a bit of a punt, but he would be affordable. It wouldn't be like we were trying to sign a player from either Ajax, PSV or Feyenoord. I don't think that a club, with no disrespect to FC20, but I don't think they would be commanding a fee that maybe the big three in Holland would. And it is a bit of a punt, a bit of a risk, but at 23, he's going to have a lot of potential. And he's got a reasonable number of games under his belt in the Eredivisie. So he's no rookie. And as I say, out of this list, possibly has the most potential out of any player on this list. So that would be, I think it would be quite an exciting signing. So maybe that would be an option for the number 10 role, the attacking midfield. And then on to the striker, the centre forward. Again, raiding Daniel Farke's old club Borussia Mönchengladbach. Now this is a player that they didn't actually have under Daniel Farke's management. However, this player, not a player that I'm particularly aware of, but he has had a couple of caps for Germany. He's in his late 20s. Tim Kleindienst. He's had a very good season in terms of goals and assists for Gladbach this season. He's in his late 20s, so this is probably the kind of limit that he's going to have. But he's an absolute unit. He's about 6'4" tall, so he'd be a handful for defenders. And if the likes of Maeda and Murphy could get some balls into the box, Kleindienst could be the type of player that could maybe replace Patrick Bamford in terms of being a pure target man. And again, a little bit of a punt, but at around 29-year-old, I don't think he would break the bank. And again, it's not like signing someone from Bayern Munich or Borussia Dortmund. With all due respect to Mönchengladbach, they're not quite of that level. And Kleindienst could be the kind of player that could maybe, bag a few goals. If he could get a dozen goals, then that'd be helpful. And if we could get any more than that, even better. But he's close to 20 goal involvements for the season. Might already be over 20 if I can't exactly remember now. But that could be. Maybe he could take that mantle of the number 9. You never can tell with any of these players. When you're signing new players and you're signing them for a division that's as so toughly competitive as the Premier League is these days, and when you're competing against teams now, because there's been 2 triple relegations in terms of the teams that have gone up and come straight back down, the top 17 in the Premier League, they're already established. They're 2 years ahead of every other team that will ever come up, and this is where the problem lies. So if you take this 11 and couple it with the best 11 that Leeds currently have, and maybe 1 or 2 others, that kind of stick into the squad at that point, then I think we will, this 11 could definitely enhance what we've got, and would provide just about enough quality for us to stay up. And then after that, you never know. But it's just vital that we stay up. That is the key thing here. And I just wanted to put an honourable mention on for James Milner, currently at Brighton and Hove Albion. he's getting on now as James, but he is Leeds through and through. He is a guy that came through the Leeds youth ranks. He's as strong and as fit as a bloody butcher's dog, honestly. Like, he's 39 and still plays a good chunk of games. That amount of experience that James Milner has, if he was to bring that to the Leeds squad, I mean, it'd be a massive boost. A massive, massive boost to what would be a relatively young squad. Um, you know, Milner could be offered a player coaching role, perhaps. Um, and to have that kind, if you were to bring that kind of experience in, he's not going to be on mega wages at this stage of his career. You know, I think that if the project's right, he could potentially rejoin Leeds. You know, maybe to finish his playing career off. You know, he started at Leeds. You know, it'd be amazing for him to finish at Leeds. So that's my take on it. This 11 is a really good blend of Premier League experience, a little bit of experience from abroad. You've got internationals in there, you know, players that have played for the country on numerous occasions. There's a couple of players there that already know what it's like to play for Leeds, so they'll be able to handle the pressure of playing for Leeds. There's players at good ages. As I say, the two fullbacks are about 24, 25. You know, that's perfect. You know, for what could be coming ahead. And then you, as I say, you've got players that are around that 29, 30 kind of age, lots of experience. You know, in the likes of Ben Davies and Jacob Murphy, for example, and then you've got, you know, you've got younger talent like Sam Stein, who, as I say, he's just had a bit of a breakout season, really, in terms of a season where he's been very productive. If he can kind of put those stats up against teams like Ajax, PSV, and Feyenoord, just to name, you know, the three big teams in Holland, you know, there's every chance that he could make it elsewhere. And you know, FC Twente have had a very good season. You know, it looks like they'll probably finish fourth. So best of the rest, and Stein's been a big part of that by the looks of it. So it could be quite an exciting talent. Klein Dienst he's just he's your big unit, old-fashioned number 9, from what I can tell. Certainly capable of scoring some goals. And if he can hold up the ball and bring the other players into play, like your Daiso Maedas and Steins and Murphy, and then when you look at the two players that would be, you know, protecting the back four, you know, with Weigl and Phillips, you know, when you think about the increased quality of the teams that Leeds are going to be against this season coming up after this summer, you know, you're going to need some rock solid players at the back there. And you know, the likes of Weigl and Phillips could potentially do that. Elvedi and Davies, you know, there's every chance they could make a good partnership. And again, you know, the likes of Lamptey and Mitchell, because I could just imagine those two bombing forward on you know, from fullback to support the attack. And then when you've got someone like Nick Pope in goal, who, you know, has played at such a good level for a long time now. Yeah, I do, like, you know, some people might look at this 11 or 12 players and just think we should be aiming for, you know, for better or be more ambitious. But you know, how far can Leeds United go? That is the question. You know, we're coming up as a new team, even though Leeds has obviously got plenty of Premier League history about them. You know, the current squad doesn't have that many players left from the Bielsa era. You know, the majority are players from the Farke era. Daniel Farke as well hasn't really had an opportunity to manage in the Premier League with a good set of resources. with a bit more backing and money behind him to be able to sign the players that he genuinely really wants. I think in the two seasons that he was promoted with Norwich, he only had a total of about 40 million combined. That's nothing. That ain't going to get you a team that's going to keep you up. Now, I mean, with the players listed here, I don't think that all of these players put together, in terms of the kind of transfers you've been looking at, I don't think these have come to, you're not looking at 100 million for bringing these 12 players in. I don't think, because some of them are out of contract anyway, and the ones who aren't out of contract, there's not really any youngsters. As I say, Stem Signs he's probably the one player that would cost the most, but I reckon we'd probably bring him in for maybe 20 million. Could FC 20 reject a 20 million bid for one of their players? I don't know. Phillips will be coming in on a loan, probably. It'd be quite a hefty loan for you, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 million, you would think, which would then maybe cover a certain proportion of his wages. The likes of Ben Davies and Jacob Murphy, I don't think would cost very much. I don't think Nick Pope would cost that much either, just because those three are a little bit older. Then the Mönchengladbach guys, again, I think they're down to maybe their last year of their contracts, possibly. They'll have like 1 year remaining, so that would then suggest that we can maybe get them for a better price. And again, you buy them from the German market. Is that going to cost so much? I don't know. And then, really, I would expect Crystal Palace and Brighton and Hove Albion to offer new contracts to Mitchell and Lamptey. I would expect them to, because the two of them are still a good age. Even if they offer them the contracts just so that they can then sell them, to get some money in. Brighton are notoriously difficult to get players from them. They command very high fees, as we saw when we tried getting Ben White, and they priced us out in the end. And then White went to Arsenal for 50 million. Tarek Mitchell obviously has got an affinity with Crystal Palace. He's been there a long time. So to move up north, from playing in London for as long as he has, I don't know. I don't know if he'd be interested. But it's all about projecting the right kind of project to these players. I don't think it would be drastically difficult to get Daizer Maeda. Probably 15 to 20 million maximum, I would think. Stein could be the awkward one, because I think he's younger and he's got that more potential. Kleindienst at 29, I don't think he would cost an absolute shed load. Wegel's a bit more important to Gladbach. He's a very, he's got quite an authority position within the club in terms of the players, so maybe he might cost a little bit more than the average player. And Alvedi is obviously a very important player in the defence there. So it's difficult to know, but we will find out in due course, I'm sure. And then, as I say, with James Milner, I just think it's a no-brainer just to get that experience in. Just bring him in any kind of role, any kind of capacity, and see what you can do. Because it'd be great for Milner to finish his career at Leeds United, in my opinion. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this, folks. Do you think any of these players would be the right kind of player for Leeds United to help keep us in the Premier League? In the first time of asking. We really don't want to go back down to the Championship. This is so vital that they get the recruitment right. The recruitment team is going to be very, very busy over the next handful of months, hopefully to bring in the right kind of players and to help us stay up. So with all that in mind, do please give the channel a subscribe if you haven't already. Do please give a thumbs up on the video, and I will see you all in the next video or live stream. In the meantime, have a great night. See you in the next stream. Bye bye.